Council?
Is there more to the staff presentation, Steve, or?
Well, if there are additional questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Well, I would talk amongst ourselves, and if you have a specific, we can call them up. I'd like to hear what you guys think.
Oh, I got so many notes.
Well, go ahead, you can ramble away.
That's what I do.
Well, I'll start. Actually, I have one question, because I know Arnold had mentioned it about not having shopping centers, but I actually spoke with a different law enforcement officer from San Diego, and she actually thought it would be a good idea to have it out in the open. It's a store, just have it, don't put it somewhere in a dark center, you know, off a dirt road. Have it right there, front and center, where it's seen and regulated, and you know, it's just, this is another thought, just because he had mentioned this as another thought.
Mom, down there on the end?
I'm so confused. I do see the benefits, and I did want to hear from people that live here. I don't think we're discussing medical. I mean, that's already here and done. I don't think we're going to make it
This would go.
We're discussing both.
both. Both for stores,
Or
but
all
not for
types,
use.
all types of,
I mean, right now, it's legal for anyone to use it here.
Yeah, I just point out, yes, it's lawful under state and local law for people to use, ingest, and do all those other activities that I mentioned.
But not okay.
Well, hold on a second. There are, with subject to those restrictions, but the city cannot decide that we don't want people to use it in our boundaries. That's off limits as far as,
Right.
this discussion really is about direction on the commercial aspects, because state law will preempt us of any city that tries to further restrict marijuana use or cultivation beyond, or make it stricter than what state law provides.
I don't think that was even our intention, was it? The only thing that I saw of this whole scenario was about a dispensary opening up in our city, which I got elected on that in 2010, whether people like it or not. That's what I got elected on, to stop the dispensary that was coming in illegally. They just come in and open up whenever they wanted and did their own thing and didn't listen to any of the rules that we had. That was one of the things I stood for, and I still stand for that. I think they already are delivering it into our city. Why would I care? I honestly don't care. Medical marijuana, I'm not involved. It's not my problem. That people need it, that's great, and I can see the benefits. I've heard about the benefits of that also. So my personal opinion is, as far as a dispensary store in our city, I'm not for it. I never will be for it. So because federal law is still what federal law is, I'm not going to risk grants that we're going to be getting from the federal government, who gives us grants also. I understand there's going to be some issues with the state of California taking away grant money from if you have a medical marijuana dispensary in your town. I don't think it's necessary. There's enough of them right around us. There's some in Elsinore. There's some on Grand Avenue. They're all over the place already. They're already open.
They're illegal.
But to have,
Illegal.
well, it has nothing to do with me. I'm not sitting in those cities. I'm sitting in this city, and I don't want to legalize a medical marijuana. Medical marijuana is coming. You can order it, it'll show up at your house. I know this because I own a delivery service and they call me every day to come and deliver. Well, I don't do that kind of stuff because I'm state regulated and have all those issues with the FDA that I have to deal with. So we don't get involved with that. But as far as a storefront in our city, I'm against it. It's just that simple. That's where I stand, and I don't think until the feds change the rule and it's not a class 1, and if the Congress decides to change that rule, then that's great. Then we can vote on that. And I think this kind of an issue for the city to think, because 52% of the people, no, I think it should be more like taxes. If you're gonna set up here and change something this drastically in our city, it should be a 66% vote, just like it is on taxes. If we want to tax somebody, we have to get a 66% vote. We did it for our park system. I think it's only fair if you get 66% of the people say, hey, yeah, we can have a dispensary in your town, then, okay, what can I say? Then the people have spoken. But 52% changing something this drastically, causing more issues in the city, more police, more everything else that goes on with it, I'm not for it. But you guys already knew that. That is nothing new for me. But medical marijuana, I've never had a problem with it because I don't have, it's not about me, it's about her and it's about other patients that need it. Whether I agree with it or not, that has nothing to do with anything. It's just, in our city, dispensaries are a negative. And you hear from the people in the area, who wants it next to your house? I'm already getting calls on one right over here on Clinton Keith that's trying to open right now, and we're stopping them. But they still operate every day without any rules, without anybody. And you know, and everybody says, well, you need to regulate. No, we don't need to regulate. It already comes into the city. It already can come into the city with drivers. Why do we need to add that to something else that the city of Wildomar needs to deal with and have money going out of our pockets to try to deal with all those kind of issues?
You won't get any tax.
Hey, listen, we already talked about that. Listen, we already have public comments. This is about us now. We're talking amongst ourselves. We're giving you our advice. We're giving you what we think.
Is the workshop over?
It's not a workshop.
It's not a workshop. It's a special meeting. And we already let you have the 3 minutes. If you wanted to talk, we gave you the opportunity. Listen, you can hear how everybody is up here. If they want to do it, this is up to them also. There's 5 of us. I'm just telling you, I don't see the benefits. I don't see the benefit. Whether you agree with me or not, it's okay. It doesn't make any difference. I don't see the benefit for my constituents that live in this city. If we're going to make this kind of a drastic move, then it needs to be a 66% vote and it needs to go to a city election in order to do it. That's my personal opinion, and I think that would be more applicable than us 5 people deciding what we're going to do or not. I think it's fair.
That's Steve. So
Because the state of California does things doesn't mean that the city of Wildomar gets to do whatever they want to. Just because the state and all these other states that go against federal law, that has nothing to do with me. I'm in a city and I was elected and this is what I believe and that's the way I'm going to stand. No, I'm sorry, we won't have any more comments right now.
question for Steve. Steve, so for the special election, the 66 2/3 special tax, then we would direct where the money goes?
Yeah.
And that's only if you want to make it a special tax.
But then that's the only way to make it the 66 2/3.
Well, that's just on the tax, not on the issue of regulation.
Right.
General use.
So say we're gonna allow it, we're gonna put it to the voters, I'm just saying it.
That would be a majority.
That would go to general
Not
funds.
66.
That would-
The 66 only applies to the issue of whether there's a special tax, whether you
That's
can
what I'm
approve a
asking.
special tax.
So if it's a special tax, then we direct, do you understand what I'm saying?
Well,
Special tax, then we direct where the money's going?
it would be a special,
Think
for special use, like the parks, that was a special tax, it could only be spent on the parks.
So we could say police,
You'd
say
That requires 67%. General use is just 51%. Money collected can be spent in the general fund on anything.
Well, I think it should be the same way on this. I mean, if you're going to allow these type of things inside the city, and if we only do the majority, right now everybody says 53% voted for Prop 64. That's fine. But it doesn't say anywhere in that law that we have to allow a dispensary in our city. We have the right to stop the dispensaries. That's the issue with me. Whether 53%, then we'll put it back on the ballot and say, okay, folks, you want a dispensary? You come up and put your name on the line, and you get over 50%, then you can have a dispensary in your town. That's only fair. That's not, listen, we're not going there. We're not having other public comments. I'm just giving you what I think too. It's my turn to talk also. So I'm just saying, if we do that type of a system, that would be more fair for everyone in the city that would understand, if you vote for this, we're going to allow dispensaries in the city. Then how many do you have to have? Or how many are there going to be? And what happens if you don't allow enough and then somebody sues the city to come in? There's a whole Pandora box here. This isn't something simple to display out in a... You can shake your head all you want back there because I know who you are. Yeah, just keep shaking your head because now I'm getting irritated because I have to see it. Unfortunately, I wish there was a blank curtain for you to sit and I wouldn't have to see what you're saying or doing because, what can I say? Hey, I'm just saying it, that's right, and I've listened to your side of the story, but you're not letting us listen to our side. We're not getting to say our side of the story. So coming back to the 50% special elections.
Were you elected by 2/3?
Anyway, go ahead.
The rest of us have a minute?
Yeah.
They know where I'm at now, so that's fine.
You made that very clear, thank you. I think the rest of us need an opportunity to talk about it. You know, this is obviously, Tim mentioned the fact that 6 years ago, 7 years ago, this was a very different environment when we got elected. Things have changed a lot as I look at this. You know, the amount of people that showed up for that meeting, at my planning commission meeting, and then at the city council meeting after that were almost 100 total, if not more. And I'm looking at how many showed up tonight, that's amazing, the difference. I also look at the fact that 6 years ago, when this was voted on by the public, it was on medical marijuana, and it failed in this city. And now here we are, years later, and recreational use is now passed. I believe those are very big differences and things that we can't just ignore as elected officials for this city. You know, a couple things were mentioned. One is the ballot. I fully believe that this is a question that we should send to the ballot. I think it's a valid question because, one, we probably want to talk about putting a tax on this. You know, I'd like to get some more information on, you know, what is that tipping point? It looks to me, the state's already taking 15% plus 7 3/4 for our area. That's a huge amount of tax already that's being taken out, and could we even add it anymore? What could we add, 1, 2, 3%? What is that question? What's that threshold? I think that's something we need to discuss and look at. If we are gonna do that, we have to put that on the ballot. Well, if we're putting that on the ballot, then we should put the question to the voters as well. And that would allow the voters of the city to have that opportunity to weigh in. Now, to get it there, we would have to first, though, construct what this is gonna look like. Where, how many dispensaries, growing dispensaries, other, you know, we have 3 different pieces to regulate. Actually, it looks like this gentleman gave us 12 different potential items we'd have to regulate.
Look on the back.
There's a lot that we would have to look at. But I'm firmly in the side of at this point. We need to go down that path. We need to have those discussions. And I would hope we could have some more decorum and not go into shouting matches in the future, because that does not get us anywhere. We need to have discussions about this. So that's my recommendation. Hold on, ladies and gentlemen. No, when I'm mayor, I don't allow that. I don't think we should, because it's you don't need, you know, if you want to say that, okay, great. But we don't need the outbursts and we don't need the yelling and screaming, okay? Thank you.
Well, I'm in a unique position in that my district voted it down.
Your whole district?
The whole district.
No, it was just one precinct in your district. Your district voted for it. It was one
Yeah,
precinct.
no, it didn't vote it down.
Okay,
Yeah,
all
one
right.
precinct.
But I have a commercial area where you'd want to go. So it kind of puts me between a rock and a hard spot in some ways. I'm willing to look at it. I'm willing to see how it will look. It's just a lot to take in all in one night. And all we've ever seen is illegal use. And that hasn't been pretty in this city at all. And it has been a fight, and it's not what people want to see. Nobody wants to stop the medical use, I don't think, anywhere. But you seem to be able to get what you need already. So that's where I'm not where Tim is, and I'm not probably where Ben is. I'm somewhere in the middle still.
So,
It's a lot.
I'll preface this with, I've never tried marijuana, I've never smoked it, never chewed it, eaten it, whatever. I wouldn't know how to grow it. I would have no idea how to grow 6 plants outside or indoors. So I think I'm pretty even key with this. I believe, I made a bunch of notes, I'll just go down real quick. I agree with one of the comments, it's easier to get marijuana right now than it is to get beer or cigarettes, I agree with that. It's been illegal, people have still done it. And like you said, the guy selling it, or who they're getting it from doesn't care who they're giving it to. The voters approved it. People use it regardless. The track and trace requirement, I'd like to look into that. Is that a thing?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's an important component.
Yeah, I agree.
It's an important component of both the medical marijuana regulatory system that the governor signed into law in 2015, and it's carried forward into the AUMA. So that is something that is designed to deal with some of the problems that the state has experienced in the past, not knowing where marijuana is coming from, being able to track it from the cultivator, the manufacturer, through the testing process, all the way to the retailer. Right now, in the black market, and in some of the dispensaries that are currently operating, they don't have that, and so there's been questions and concerns about the safety and quality of those products. And so the idea behind the track and trace is to help law enforcement, also to help ensure that these products are being delivered in condition that's safe for the public to use. That's the whole idea behind that. And so since the system really isn't up and running, we haven't had an opportunity to see in California exactly how it works, but I think similar systems are in place in other states, and
We'd emulate that.
yeah, that would be the idea.
What I also noted was, the money that we'd make, that 60% or 20% goes to people with problems to, rehabilitate, X, Y, Z.
That's the money the state would make.
Yeah, and part of that money we would get to take that and help people, right? So my thought is,
Have to ask for a grant.
Have to-
yeah, well, right now we can't ask for anything. And people that have problems, we can't help regardless. I would say, at least by getting that money, we can help people that have a problem. I'm more in favor of, obviously, for marijuana, I think the answer for a November ballot would be the issue of a tax. I think that people have spoken. I went through the numbers from actually all the districts and mine. Not every district or every precinct was in favor by a huge percentage, but unfortunately that's not how things work with everything. But the majority did speak, so I'm more in favor of treating marijuana like alcohol and cigarettes. Figure out the regulation piece. It's here already. I don't even care about the money piece. At least it actually, you don't have that 16-year-old kid going to some 30-year-old, that your parents don't know, never met. I have 3 daughters. I'd rather be harder for them to get, to be honest, and follow my example. So I would say that the answer is, so today when we're looking at all this, are we directing staff to go and give me answers on potential regulations that are permissive of recreational and medical use?
If that's your direction, what we would like to know is what information you would like us to bring back to you at a future work study session.
This was informative, really. I think the idea of a subcommittee is actually, this is a lot to take in one night. I think our guest presenter brought a lot of information to the table, and I think to really delve deep into the second and third order effects of what we want to do, I think a subcommittee would be a semi-appropriate answer to this. But I'm in
That's
favor of
something we
this.
could put on a future agenda, perhaps at your April agenda. Forming a subcommittee isn't on the agenda tonight, but on the April agenda, we could put a discussion item for you to form a subcommittee.
If that's, I think the way to go, I think this is something we should do. It's here, at least it brings it into the light, like you said. I think of prohibition and all the arguments back in the day when you had, you made alcohol illegal. All that did was bring bad guys to the table, right? Al Capone, those bad guys. We made it legal again, those guys went away, and now you don't die from alcohol and you can go to the store and get some.
Well, they wouldn't because of the IRS. But
Well, you know what I mean, so yeah, God bless the IRS.
I'd like to see us compared to other cities our size, if they're in another state or wherever, and the cost to us. I mean, if we have to put something on the ballot, that's gonna cost us. If we have our attorney doing research work, that's gonna cost us. If our staff is working on it, that's gonna cost us. And we need to know what the revenue will be. How do we pay that all back? How do we pay for an election? How do we pay for staff time to do this? So I'd like to see more of the dollar side of it. Is it gonna cost us money? Is it gonna make us money? Are we gonna break even on it? Are we gonna have 10? Are we gonna have 2?
I see the election piece being the tax, that being the answer for, that being the question on the ballot. I would prefer to see us break the regulation, mirror a city that's doing this responsibly. I mean, I don't want us to reinvent the wheel, and I was actually happy to see the 16 different pieces that, have you looked at this?
Different categories?
Yeah, no, like you have pretty much the steps, the applicant information for all owners.
With the state license requirements.
I mean, I've reviewed Prop 64, and so I'm
The requirements.
familiar with those
Okay.
requirements, but I did not get a copy of the breakdown.
There you
I
go.
think I'm gonna get one right now.
There we go.
Actually, I'm happy to see that. I think the way to do it is to regulate it. I think that's a responsible thing for a city to do. That's how I feel about it. I think it's responsible of us.
I've been to 2 or 3 different League of Cities meetings where they talked about the state regulations and the state framework. This is definitely all part of that, if not some more. And so, yeah, that's out there. Would you agree, Steve, if we're looking at that quickly?
I would agree. I mean, that was the whole point behind, now it's called MCRSA, Medical Cannabis Regulation Safety Act. It used to be MRSA.
They didn't like that one, huh?
They didn't like that one. So, and when I talked at the league conferences on this, I mean, that was kind of the message I was getting at, was that, you know, they had a lot of problems prior to those laws being adopted. And cities were struggling with what they can and can't do, and so a lot of litigation. You know, we had a lot of litigation following Prop 215 and then Senate Bill 420, which created the Medical Marijuana Program Act. There was a lot of uncertainty. So the idea here was to kind of answer a lot of those questions once and for all and put into effect for the first time a regulatory framework. So it's still getting off the ground, and the objective was to get the system in place for January 2018 to issue licenses statewide. And I know it's going to be a scramble to get all of the state regulations in place to meet that deadline, but I know that the Bureau of Marijuana Control, it's headed by Lori Ajax, is working hard to get everything in place. So we'll see. I know that they're still aiming for January 1st, 2018. So a lot of this stuff is really hasn't launched yet. We're still waiting to see how it's going to play out.
Well, Steve, so I attended the conference in February in Riverside.
Yes.
And at that time, I'm not sure, I remember the gentleman's name that spoke, but the state had not issued the RFP yet for that tracking system. And that was
Yeah,
February.
still-
So they were already looking at a contingent plan of how this is all gonna go
But they
down.
would come up with some temporary regulations in place until, can come up with something.
So yes, there will be a tracking system, but they have not even gone out for the
The
RFP
way to
yet.
go forward with this, I'm trying to, you know, how I am, I'm trying to make it so you guys have the lateral limits to give me what I need, you know, so. With the way to go, you know, assuming 2 other people agree with me, go back and get, I don't know, the entire list of very permissive regulations, bring it back to another meeting, and line out what we don't like, or have a workshop with the subcommittee and line out what we don't like, and come up with a framework? Or is the better option, I mean, this is, you've done this, do you take another city's ordinances they have in place already?
But we'll need 2
Can we
ordinances.
apply, you know, apply it to, or?
Well,
We're
there's a number of different approaches you can take. Since there are a number of cities that have systems in place, I mentioned a couple of them that
Yeah.
have taken different approaches. As far as what you want to do, you could have us come back at a future meeting, and I think one of the steps you probably would want to take is to get a map of the city to see what zones are out there.
Are we doing it, are we gonna zone it, or we're gonna treat it like, and that's.
Right.
I think as a starting point, that might be part of your decision.
Yeah.
To see what the city looks like, you know, from a zoning perspective, and then map out where the schools and youth centers and daycare centers are, so that you know some places are gonna be off limits under state law.
Yeah.
And then what will that leave you with? And then from there, you can make some decisions on, do you wanna take a zoning approach, or do you wanna take a different approach?
Yeah.
Right, I think the first step is come back with a zoning map that shows the uses. Then we can discuss regulatory concepts, and you can give us maybe some more detailed direction that way.
Okay.
Then maybe we come back with a draft ordinance that incorporates your direction. Then you can line out what you don't like or add what you.
And that's what I've been doing with some other cities, is trying to come up with menus of options. And it is pretty common for cities to want to take this over the course of multiple meetings and maybe set up workshops, because
Yeah.
it is a lot of,
Yeah.
there are a lot of choices to make and a lot of information to digest, but I think from a starting standpoint, you really need to have kind of that overview with, you know, get your zoning map out and do some overlays, kind of see where places are, and that'll give you an idea of what you're working with to begin with, and then from there you can kind of map out, you know, and you can come back at those future meetings and say, you know, I want to focus on medical marijuana, or I want to do a combination of both businesses.
In my eyes,
or-
it's both, and that's.
And I know that Governor Brown would really prefer at the state level to kind of look at it as kind of a unitary regulatory system as much as possible, not to have these parallel schemes, but that's the way it's set up right now. We have medical marijuana laws and we have AUMA.
Careful, Steve, we really don't care what that governor says in most.
And I was gonna let you know, I'm getting arrested, making this decision, getting arrested, as long as everybody else in Sacramento gets arrested, I'm totally fine with that. I'd be a martyr, I'd be happy, yeah.
I mean, those are decisions you'll need to make, and just as far as what businesses you want to, if you're gonna go down that path, which businesses you want to see operating in the city, manufacturing, cultivating, what type, and there are several different types of cultivation businesses based on size and type of, the scope of the operation, indoor, outdoor. So those are all choices you can make.
So actually, I think a subcommittee, I'm not for a subcommittee, I think it's too important for, I think all 5 of us need to be there.
And I think it needs to all be public.
And I was gonna say, back when I was mayor in 2010, this came up on the agenda, and at that time, the residents were not for it, or majority of the residents were not for it. But I agree with Ben that I think the tide is changing, and so it's something that we can look further into. It just doesn't mean we're saying yes, it just says we're looking into all the different information. I'm so concerned with the federal, issues, but we'll see. But I think we have a lot more questions still than we do answers, and
A
so
lot more questions.
we need more workshops.
The zoning map, I'm not too sure how crazy I am with that. I think we should do a number per capita. I mean, we're a small city, we don't need.
Well, in ordinance, we could have that. The ordinance, having the ordinance could
But that's what I'm
detail
saying,
it
not
out.
by zone.
Yeah. It could say how many, any way we want it, and what the tax is gonna be. Put it on the ballot and let the voters
There's
decide.
more that want to be here, there can be a lottery or whatever to decide who comes in, but I don't want to see any commercial strip that's out here have the zone that it can be there.
Well, then you need to look at it by zone then. You want to look at it by zone.
I
Say where you do or
want
what
to
zone
look
you
at
do or
it
don't
by
want.
zone, but I don't want a zone,
Specifically for marijuana.
Right.
Right, no, what we're looking
Right.
at would be, what zones would you be okay with
Your
it in?
permitted use.
And the reason why you want to have a map is to start with, okay.
no, I want a map to start with,
Yeah.
definitely,
and
for both purposes.
The zoning could say, okay, we don't want it in residential, we don't want it in this, but in this would have to be separate for cultivation and for manufacturing
Right.
and for dispensaries, so. Okay.
Well,
Staff, I'm gonna try to summarize a little.
Okay, help.
And summarize the various questions that you've heard we've asked that you're answering. I was trying to, I think you probably have a better idea.
Okay, well, I think maybe the best way to go about this is just kind of bite-sized meetings and not try to answer all of those questions in one meeting. So I've got a list of all those questions. I think gonna focus on the next meeting of what we'll bring to you, and then that can lead to more. So what I'm hearing is the next meeting will be a zoning map that draws some radius circles as far as distances from sensitive uses, just as a discussion point, and then you all can further refine where you want those distances to be and what zones you want it in, but we're gonna have to take a first stab at it. We will then bring also just some regulatory concepts, I think that will kind of help. You've already touched on some of them. Is it going to be kind of a lottery system? Is there going to be a cap? Is it
like the scoring.
score? I mean, but we won't make it, but we just kind of bring, kind of like Steve said, a menu of options. You can then focus us in on what options you like best. I think that might be enough for the next bite at this. At least that's, if I'm getting nods of head, that's what we'll bring you, and we'll kind of go from there. Let me clarify, do you want, I heard different opinions on a subcommittee. Do you?
No, I'm fine with those subcommittee,
No, so
that's fine with
It's
all
too
of
important, all 5 of us.
Then that's what we'll bring back to you at a future meeting. We'll primarily focus the discussion around the map.
Okay, but so is that next meeting gonna be at like the second Wednesday of the month, or it's gonna be the fourth Wednesday of the month?
Probably depends on, planning department, how soon they can pull together this map.
When do we do
It
that
would
next
probably-
meeting? Is that a regular scheduled?
Probably a special meeting where this is the only item on the agenda, not during another council meeting. I mean, it's up to you all how you
I
want
like
to do it.
I like keeping them separate and doing the
Yeah.
fourth,
Okay?
that way we can.
I know we have another
And whether it's
fifth
every other month
Wednesday.
or whatever, I'm not in a big rush, I wanna see what the state does. I kind of want to see where they come in, and all of these things that we have here are given to us, but the state doesn't have this written down in a law that I've seen yet.
Right.
So I'd kind of like to take it slow and know what the state's doing before we jump in and make our rules, and they're different, or they don't work together.
Yeah, I was thinking with like the delivery, like we just put a pin in that until the states give us guidelines, like.
It's here now, and everybody's doing what they want to do here now. There probably are some dispensaries here that we don't know about for sure, that are
One
actually
right down the street on
operating.
Clinton Keith, they're
The
open.
Their sign that's covered now.
Oh, well,
Yeah, they're not.
weed map says different.
Okay, I think we've got direction unless there's anything else that you'd like to add.
That it?
You know, hey, Tom, can you bring back, with part of this, so right now we're gonna look at the map and the zoning, maybe the negatives and positives of what, the city you mentioned, that didn't look at zoning at all, and they just had,
I believe that's the approach that Vallejo took.
okay,
A little more of a hands-off. We're gonna impose distance requirements and then separation requirements between dispensaries.
yeah.
At one point, they had, I think, 30 or more dispensaries operating,
I
but
think the market would figure that
a
out.
number of them were
Yeah.
violating the various requirements, and they're down to 10. And the information I have is that they haven't had any issues over the last couple of years with those 10 that are operating.
Yeah, okay. Is there, can we get info on that? I'd like to see that, other than that.
I'd also like to see what the federals are saying, because I know they're dealing with it, and I'd like to know what they're coming out with. Because if they're gonna change it, it changes everything. But right now, it hasn't changed, and I'd like to know what the implications are for the city with our federal grants that we already received, that we will lose. That's what they're already saying, so I'd like to know what they think too, because that's very important, that's loss of income for us.
I'm still waiting for them to take up the Second Amendment issue I have with California.
What federal grant dollars do we get besides CDBG here?
The STIP,
What is it?
Surface Transportation Improvement Act or Program.
Yeah,
Federal
we are using transportation dollars. We have CMAQ funds that are half the construction cost for Grand Avenue bike lane. And then we'll get the rest of whatever else we get in the STP or the TDA money.
Okay.
And then we also received the CERT grant and emergency grant too,
And CDBG?
and CDBG.
There's a lot of money on the table, basically.
CDBG, I've heard, is already on the chopping block, and I'd be wondering how much of these other ones are already on the chopping block with the president's budget, so it might be a moot point, I don't know, it's something else we probably need to get answered.
We've got enough to answer it.
I know, well, these are not at the next meeting, but as we progress.
Yes.
No, that's fine, I'm fine with that. Give us a chance to think about it.
May
All right.
I just interject one thing?
Yes, sir.
One question that won't require map analysis is what the city council would like to do with regard to personal cultivation. Because that's just, it falls into that other component that I talked about. And right now, the moratorium that's in place says no cultivation with the exception of what we have to allow, which is the 6 plants per private residence. And so at some point, I don't know if that would be appropriate for that upcoming meeting or whether we schedule that for a future meeting after that. Just a further discussion on which direction the council would like to go on that particular component.
Okay.
Well, I noticed that on the three things, that issue one was commercial marijuana and all the activities there. Then the second one is personal cultivation. Well, it's already passed in Prop 64 that they can do that. So that's not an issue for me. It's never been an issue. And then the marijuana deliveries, it's not an issue because we don't have to deal with my whole issue was the dispensary sitting in our city, that's all. That was my issue. It's storefront. But if you guys, that's gonna be completely up to you. I mean, we're gonna still we can look at all the zoning and everything. Yeah, I know, and that's what I'm saying. We're gonna talk, we can look at all the information and see everything, but I want all the other information too, state what they're doing. Because there's no reason to we're not gonna go beyond what they're already telling us we can do and what the feds are gonna do. That's what I'd like to know. What's the total cost for us at the end of the day?
Along those same lines, asking what the feds are going to do. Steve, can we get a presentation on the state framework that has been passed with Prop 64? I know Bridget and I have seen that at when we go to League of Cities meetings. I think Marcia maybe wants to hear a little more of that. What is actually in that framework as far as how all this works and everything else?
Sure.
Okay.
Talk more about the, you're talking about like what the steps are. So I can come back and explain to you
Steps
how,
for
how the
licensing.
application process is gonna work and
Right, all the stuff the state is looking at implementing, just so we're all on
I
the
will-
same page
I will-
on that.
go over that, and then obviously with the caveat that there'll probably be more details to be provided when the regulations are adopted.
Sure.
Okay, everything in? Okay, with that, we're adjourned.